On today's episode of Locked On Wild, did Judd Brackett do more with less in the 2025 NHL Draft? Plus, the Wild's got their depth goalie.
Hey, this is Matt Boldy, and you're listening to Locked On Wild.
You're Locked On Wild, your daily podcast on the Minnesota Wild. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is happening, everybody? Welcome into another episode of Locked On Wild, your daily Minnesota Wild podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, we are your team each and every day, and we thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day as well. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast platforms so you don't miss out on any new episodes throughout the week. On today's episode of Locked On Wild, we'll dive into the 2025 Minnesota Wild draft class with some reaction to each pick, and we'll see how these players slot in to the Minnesota Wild prospect pool. We'll also take a look at a few depth signings the Wild made today, including that elusive third goalie we were looking for the Wild to sign at some point this offseason. All that coming up on today's show. My name is Seth Toupal, host of Locked On Wild, host of Seth on Sports, credentialed media member, and I've been meaning to get to this for the last couple of days, but trades, signings have pushed it a little further down the road. So we're going to talk draft class here today. We're going to also take a look at some depth signings, and I want to kind of set the scene for what is coming up here. Beyond this week, we will have a look at the top prospects in the Minnesota Wild farm system, kind of trying to make that become an annual thing of just looking at, after the draft, the top 10 prospects in the Minnesota Wild farm system. So we'll do that coming up tomorrow. We will take a little bit of a look back to the big 4th of July spending spree that the Minnesota Wild spent on Zach Parise-Ryan Suter, and what has transpired since. That's coming up for you on Friday, the 4th. And then next week, we're going to start player evals from the 2024-2025 season. This will include coach and GM evaluations as well. That'll take up most of the month of July. In August, we're going to take a tour through the rest of the NHL by doing crossover shows with the various Locked On hosts from other shows, other teams. And then it's boot camp in September. We'll take a look at the team, the line combinations. We'll get everything ironed out for the start of the season all through the month of September. So kind of what we got in the hopper. Obviously, if there's any big news that breaks, we will deviate from the plan. Probably give you a bonus episode to react to all that news. But Minnesota Wilds, all told, with the Freddie Gaudreau trade, had 5 picks in the 2025 NHL Draft. They did not have a first-round pick. They had a second. They had 2 fourths. They had a 5th and a 6th. So you didn't have a ton of high capital to make really impact moves, impact draftings. But by all accounts, Judd Brackett still was able to find some diamonds in the rough, drafted some young players with promise that may take a little longer to develop, because as of right now, your NHL roster is pretty full. You've got prospects to fill spots, so it's not as though you have any immediate, like, we have to get somebody to fill this position as soon as possible type scenarios. So let's start with the second-round pick for the Minnesota Wild, and that was the defenseman, Theodor Hallquisth, who was taken with the 52nd overall pick. And ironically, this was who Corey Pronman had the Minnesota Wild selecting in his mock draft, which I kind of thought, defenseman, is that really... I would prioritize offense more. That's just me. But Hallquisth ended up being the pick. And it's interesting. NHL Central Scouting had him ranked 22nd amongst European skaters. Here's a little bio into Hallquisth. We'll get some of Judd Brackett's thoughts as well. Theodor Hallquisth is one of the younger players eligible for the 2025 NHL Draft. yet he got some playing time in Europe's challenging Swedish Hockey League. The right-shot defenseman had a notable performance against all different kinds of competition, whether they were his age or much older. And just looking at some of the things that he brings to the table, Hallquisth is a two-way defenseman who shows flashes at both ends of the ice. Starting defensively, he has some intriguing shutdown qualities that likely contributed to him getting a chance in the SHL. One of his strengths is taking space away from opponents and forcing them into making hasty decisions. He possesses excellent vision, which allows him to be more assertive on the defensive side. He knows where his teammates are. Hallquisth has some decent stick skills, throws around his body, and his retrieval game is a net positive. Puck moving from the defensive zone is another area where Hallquisth excels. His IQ comes into play here as he regularly makes the best decisions when moving the puck, even if those decisions aren't obvious. One of the top prospects of the 2025 NHL Draft, Anton Frondell, showed that when he and Hallquisth shared the ice at the Five Nations tournament for under 18 players, the best puck movers can create space for stars. Focusing on offense, Hallquisth has great instincts, but not necessarily an X-factor trait. His in-zone passing and shooting both seem to be above average, though, so don't overlook his potential on the offensive front. As far as NHL potential goes, though Hallquisth didn't score a ton of points, there's a very real chance he will make the NHL someday. His traits usurp the importance of production. A possible ceiling here is a second-pairing defenseman, and one that every playoff team will want on their roster. His strengths are vision, hockey IQ, defensive positioning and aggressiveness, physicality, and puck-moving ability. Areas for improvement: point totals are good, but fall well short of defensemen drafted in early rounds. He could be more active in the offensive zone. So think defensive defenseman here who can add some offense to the arsenal. And I think that tracks with what we've seen the Minnesota Wild do over their handful of selections. And Judd Brackett said Theodor is a highly competitive two-way puck mover with a high hockey sense. High IQ defensive defenseman is what we know about Theodor Hallquisth. The next pick for the Minnesota Wild was Adam Benak in the 4th round. Here's what the hockey writers had to say. And if I'm getting any of these not 100% right in the pronunciation, we're doing the best we can here. Adam Benak quickly became a name to watch for the 2025 NHL Draft after his performance at the 2023 and 2024 Linka Gretzky Cup. He had 6 goals and 21 points across both tournaments and became the all-time leader in points, surpassing Magnus Parjärvi's 5 goals and 15 points. He accomplished the feat on August 6, 2024 against Germany when he posted a hat trick and 5 points, leading Czechia to a 7-3 win. And looking at some of his skills that he brings to the table, similar to the forwards mentioned above, Benak is an electrifying and exciting player to watch. He was compared to Logan Stankoven, Lane Hudson, Connor Garland as somebody that falls to the 2nd or 3rd round. Ended up getting taken in the 4th. His game is based on speed, both in skating and stick handling, tenacity, and the willingness to take on defenders, almost always bigger and stronger than him. When it comes to his skating, he has been described as one of, if not the top player in his draft class. So skating, skill, in addition to his exceptional skating and edge work, Benak has quick hands and the ability to maneuver through traffic. According to Sherratt's tracking after 19 games this season, he was in the 87th percentile in deke attempts per 60 and 84th percentile in successful dekes per 60. His vision and playmaking also stand out as does his quick and hard shot, which he doesn't use nearly as often as he should. His coach did highlight his ability to find his teammates with his vision and passing abilities, though, which led to a team-high 42 assists, second only to Landon Gunnarson's 45 in the entire USHL. When it comes to weaknesses, Benak's size will always come up, but Ward doesn't see it that way, saying the thing about Adam is he's physical, he's tenacious, and he works hard. So when I look at Adam, he plays big, he plays hard. I don't see a single issue with his size at all. He more than makes up for it with his relentlessness. I don't think anyone should be concerned about his size. I certainly think he's not. His draft, his NHL potential, Benak has the skill, set, and attitude to become a success story like Stankoven and Garland. If he can keep getting stronger, improve defensively, and shoot the puck more to balance out his offensive game, he legitimately could become a top 6 winger in the NHL. Hockey writers, they say, I have said it before and I will say it again, never underestimate small, skilled players with a workhorse attitude. They always seem to prove their doubters wrong. His strengths: skating, agility and edge work, hands, passing, playmaking, shot, motor, hockey IQ. Areas for improvement: size, defensive game, tendency to pass more than he shoots. Kirill Kaprizov, Marco Rossi, Matt Zuccarello, the Minnesota Wilds are not shy when it comes to taking undersized players. And you can be successful in the NHL if you are undersized, although I will say, having a player that is 5'7", although he was born in 2007, he's 18. So there's a chance to hit that little bit of a growth spurt. And even if you can get to 5'10", 5'11", that's better than 5'7". But it's pretty clear that Judd Brackett puts speed, skating, and skill above size in his desirable draft traits. So I would say of the players that the Minnesota Wild drafted, those are the two most notable. The two most notable that have the best chance to get to the NHL level. And so out of 5 draft picks, having 2 guys that have a pretty decent shot to get to the NHL level, I would say is pretty good. Now we'll take a look at the other 3 coming up in segment 2. And then, as we mentioned, we'll finish by looking at the crop of depth signings the Minnesota Wild made today, including that elusive third depth goalie. We'll talk about all that as we continue today's episode of Locked On Wild after this. Today's episode of Locked On Wild is brought to you by Monarch Money. Ever wish managing your money felt easier? With Monarch Money, it can. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is more than a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all of your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you are also building wealth. My favorite part about Monarch Money is that I don't have to flip through various apps. You've got different apps for your credit cards, your banking, your finances. Monarch puts them all in one place so I can get a detailed breakdown of everything all at once. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNHL for half off your first year. Welcome back to today's episode of Locked On Wild. Once again, we thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day. Again, we've been having a wave of new followers on the YouTube channel, which I absolutely love to see. If you are looking for a place that's going to keep you up to date on all things Minnesota Wild all throughout the offseason, Locked On Wild is your place to go. We are not taking any days off. Maybe 1 or 2 here or there. But we are going to be with you every single weekday of the offseason as we navigate through player evaluations from this past season. We'll start to throw out some hypotheticals for the upcoming season, and we'll probably look ahead as we try to plot out the best course for this franchise with Kirill Kaprizov and his impending extension. There are a lot of questions to talk about in the offseason, and we are your number one spot to find it all right here. Continuing to look at the 2025 draft class for the Minnesota Wild. And with the second fourth round pick that the Minnesota Wild had, they had 3 total. Second fourth round pick that they had was forward Lirim Amidovski. He also 18. Judd Brackett says he is a fast two-way winger. And here's a little profile on Lirim Amidovski of the North Bay Battalion in the OHL. He's played there for the last 3 seasons. Lirim Amidovski has steadily carved interest for him in the hockey world, showcasing his athleticism as a winger for the North Bay Battalion in the Ontario Hockey League. Amidovski was drafted by North Bay in the 9th round of the 2022 OHL priority selection. Since then, he has worked his way up the ranks, improving his offensive production and refining his game. In the 2024-2025 season, he posted career highs with 19 goals, 13 assists, 32 total points in 67 games. According to the draft write-up here at OHL Writers, strengths for Amidovski include north-south speed. Amidovski is a strong skating winger who excels in straight-line speed. He consistently surprises defenders with his ability to drive wide and create separation. Also scoring upside, his heavy shot and willingness to attack the high-danger areas between the hash marks make him a legitimate scoring threat. His physical presence. Amidovski is not afraid to engage physically, using his size and strength to battle along the boards and in front of the net, and his penalty-killing ability. His speed, length, and relentless motor make him an effective penalty killer, capable of disrupting opposing plays and creating shorthanded opportunities. Does this sound familiar? This sounds like somebody that used to be on this Minnesota Wild roster that played fourth line. He penalty killed. He was a fan favorite. Areas for improvement include inconsistent production. Despite his athletic profile, Amidovski's offensive numbers have fluctuated, raising concerns about his ability to maintain consistent scoring output. Skating ability. While his straight line speed is impressive, his overall skating mechanics remain a work in progress. He struggles with stops and starts, edge work and balance when playing through contact, and decision-making under pressure. Amidovski can sometimes get caught in predictable patterns, making it easier for defenders to anticipate his movements. Projection for Amidovski. Despite his areas for improvement, Amidovski remains an intriguing prospect with NHL potential. His combination of speed, physicality, and scoring ability makes him a valuable asset, and with continued development, he could become a reliable contributor at the professional level. He just seems like Brandon Duhaime to me. Like I hear all those areas of strength, the speed, the ability to generate breakouts and odd man rushes, penalty killing ability. He just seems like he just seems like a Brandon Duhaime type player. And you think about how vital of a player that was to what the Minnesota Wild did, at least when Duhaime was here. So I would say still the first 2 selections seem like the most likely to get to the NHL level. Amidovski, though, don't be surprised if maybe he carves out a role a little lower in the lineup. Now, the final 4th round pick for the Minnesota Wild was a player that we actually did a little draft profile on. So got one, Carter Klippenstein of the Brandon Wheat Kings. Here's what the hockey writers had to say about Klippenstein as a potential prospect. Carter Klippenstein is a gritty power forward who has the potential to be a staple in a team's bottom 6 if he's able to reach his full potential. He specializes in using his physicality and size to disrupt plays, which could translate well to the professional game. The main concern surrounding Klippenstein is his lack of offensive contribution. He brings very little offensive upside, having just 14 goals and 14 assists this season for the Western Hockey League's Brandon Wheat Kings. When he does score, it's no surprise that many of his goals come from near the crease. He battles for loose pucks during scrambles in front of the goaltender and occasionally knocks them in. He does have a dangerous shot when he gets space in the slot as well, though he doesn't utilize it very often. The best case scenario for Klippenstein would be carving out a defensive specialist role at the NHL level, similar to that of Nico Sturm of the Stanley Cup champion Florida Panthers. However, Klippenstein is a very raw talent that likely won't see top level of hockey for at least a few years. It's far from a guarantee that he ever makes it to the show. His strengths, his size, he's reliable in his own zone, brings energy through physicality, and has a strong work ethic. Areas for improvement include his skating ability, which leaves much to be desired, and inconsistent offensive contribution. Okay, so I know they used Nico Sturm as the example, but I was honestly thinking, and he's not going to quite get to Marcus Foligno level, but he is 6'3". He kind of reminds me of Foligno a little bit in, physical, gets to the net, scores in close. And, the fact that he's viewed as a little bit more of a project, there's time for him to potentially fill out a little bit before he makes it to the league. So that was the final of the fourth round selections. Judd Brackett said Carter is a hard-nosed two-way center who excels on the penalty kill. So that was Carter Klippenstein, final fourth round pick. And then the last selection for the Minnesota Wild in this year's draft was Justin Kipkie in the fifth round. And here is a look at what Kipkie brings to the table. He is a 6'4", 207-pound left shot defenseman. Kipkie's success starts in the neutral zone. Most players jump into the passing lane. He stays behind his opponent, reaches in to deflect the puck, and then wraps them up. Primarily a shooter, Kipkie loads up for booming one-timers, walks into space before firing, and occasionally beats defenders off the point with his hands. A dexterous shot allows contortionist-like wristers off tricky passes and under pressure. Judd Brackett says Justin is an offensive puck mover with big size. He had 62 points and a plus 18 rating in 64 games with the Victoria Royals in the WHL last season. He also served as team captain. So Kipkie appears at this point to be more of an offensive defenseman who also has some size to him. Think David Jiricek. So you're adding levels to this defense, and Jake Middleton's not going to be around forever. So the size element is not going to be there forever unless you start to get these guys like Jiricek, like Kipkie at some point. He is 19. So I would imagine it's going to be a few seasons at least before we potentially see him at the NHL level. But having defense-oriented defensemen and having kind of the complement of more offense-oriented ones, these all just seem to kind of tie in together just naturally, which you got to love as well. But I would say of the five, I think Theodor Hallquisth and Adam Benak are the two that are the most likely to get to the NHL level. So of the five, if Judd Brackett has two that hit, and even if the other three end up being solid AHL guys, there is a need for that in your organization as well. But I would say of five selections, if you can get two that hit, that's a pretty good success rate. So that's your 2025 NHL draft class. Now, the Minnesota Wild did make a couple of depth signings to fill out the back end of their roster. We'll take a look at the names, including the goalie that I've been talking about the last few days. That was a need for the Minnesota Wild. They found one. So we'll tell you who as we finish today's episode of Locked On Wild after this. Final segment of today's episode of Locked On Wild. And once again, we thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day. Once again, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss out on any new episodes throughout the week. We will have you covered all off-season long. A lot of other shows tend to maybe go into a little bit of a hibernation mode. Not Locked On Wild. We got you covered every single day of the offseason. So the Minnesota Wild made a few depth signings. These are not names that are supposed to factor too much into the equation. These are going to be guys that spend time in Iowa. If you end up having just another rash of injuries like the Wild have had the last couple of seasons, these could be guys that you see on the back end. But just keep track in your head of the number of players that the names sound familiar. And we'll start with the goaltender. The Minnesota Wild signing goaltender Cal Petersen to a 1-year, $775,000 contract. They signed forward Nicolas Aube-Kubel to a 1-year, 2-way contract. Defenseman Ben Gleason to a 1-year, 2-way contract. Defenseman Matt Kiersted to a 2-year, 2-way contract. And forward Tyler Pitlick to a 2-year, 2-way contract. Petersen, age 30, he was with the Los Angeles Kings most recently. Did not get into any NHL games this past season, but he started 35 games, as recently as 2021-2022. But he was with the Lehigh Valley Phantoms in the AHL last season. Posted a 13-15-3 record, 3.14 goals against average, .885 save percentage this past season. In his career, 92, 98, and 30, a 313 goals against average, a 901 save percentage, and 11 shutouts across 6 AHL seasons with Lehigh Valley and the Ontario Reign. He also has plenty of experience at the NHL level as well, parts of 6 seasons with the LA Kings and the Philadelphia Flyers. So before anybody, the only reason that Petersen was signed was for the exact scenario that I've laid out a few times this offseason. The expectation is that Filip Gustavsson will be the starter. Jesper Wallstedt will be the backup. That's the expectation for this upcoming season. But what happens if one of those two gets injured? Samuel Levi is going to likely be your regular starter in Iowa, but I don't know that he's ready to come up and be a backup at the NHL level. Cal Petersen has done it. So if Filip Gustavsson gets hurt, the expectation would be that Jesper Wallstedt would start in his stead and that Cal Petersen would come up and back him up. This is like some of the names that the Wild have had in the organization the last few years that don't factor in a ton. $775K is a minimal deal. Now, if this ends up that all of a sudden Cal Petersen is your backup and Jesper's down in Iowa, then yeah, this is going to be something that gets questioned. But I think at this point, this is just a body that can provide you a little bit of experience in the event that you suffer a goalie injury during the season. So it's a name. That's about all I look into it. As far as the others go, Nicolas Aube-Kubel has some NHL experience in a few different situations, a few different teams around the league. He has been in the playoffs as well. He's played 304 career NHL games with the Flyers, the Avalanche, the Toronto Maple Leafs, the Washington Capitals, the Buffalo Sabres, and the New York Rangers. He's not going to be anybody that factors into the equation really at all other than if you suffer a rash of injuries again this year. And then he can come in and he can be a fourth line NHL guy. He can come in and he's somebody that is on a similar vein to Devon Shore, but maybe can be a little more productive in a pinch. Same thing for Tyler Pitlick, who has played, he's played in 420 career NHL games over 10 seasons. Edmonton Oilers, Dallas Stars, Philadelphia Flyers, Arizona Coyotes, Calgary Flames, Montreal Canadiens, St. Louis Blues, and the New York Rangers. These are just people that if you need somebody to come up in a pinch on like your fourth line, they can do that. And they'll spend a lot of time down in Iowa as a little bit of veteran presence to help bring the young prospects along. But until these guys steal roster spots from people, they're just names at this point. The only reason that we're discussing it is just to kind of introduce you to them. They're not going to factor in much unless things go horrendously wrong. If you have a Nicolas Aube-Kubel playing above a fourth line in a pinch role, your season has gone terribly, terribly wrong. So if everything goes according to plan, these guys will play in Iowa and that'll be the end of it. But this is just like what happened last year, where you're bringing in some guys that at least have NHL experience so that if the season goes completely off the rails, you're not panicking and scrambling to fill the bottom of your lineup. And, you know, can I just talk about one other thing, at least at this point, that I am relieved that we're not going to have to worry about? The penny pinching that has gone on with this roster over the last few years was some of the least favorite things that I had to follow since taking over as host of this show. The penny pinching, and we're sending this guy down to accumulate cap space. You are going to go into the season with more than enough to operate on a daily basis. Now, there will probably be times where the Wild do play with, 13 forwards and 7 defensemen and don't carry the full roster so that they can accumulate some additional cap space for the trade deadline. So there may be some of that, but it's not going to be a day-to-day basis. If you have a long road trip, you can call a forward and a defenseman up without any problems. So I think that may be one of the things that I'm most glad about this upcoming season, is just not having to pull out the abacus every time a game is played just to try to make the roster work. We're going to take a look at the top 10 prospects in the Minnesota Wild's farm system tomorrow. So be on the lookout for that episode. And then, as I mentioned, we'll revisit the 4th of July fireworks with Zach Parise-Ryan Suter from way back in the days. The 4th of July extravaganza, and what have we learned since? That's coming up for you on 4th of July. So that is our episode here for today. Appreciate everybody tuning in as you do each and every day of the week. Once again, make sure to leave a like and subscribe on YouTube. If you listen to us on any of the major audio platforms as well, and you feel like leaving a review, we love that. If you want to leave some feedback on the show, feel free to do so. Whether it be on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify. I do check those periodically. So if you feel like leaving a shout out, we appreciate you taking the time to do so. Should have the listener survey done next week. Things have just gotten kind of crazy with work vacations and such. So should have that done next week. Going to iron out the final few bits of that over the 4th of July weekend so that we can start getting feedback from you, our wonderful listeners, on how the show can improve heading into next season. So with that, enjoy the rest of your Wednesday, And we'll catch you with a new episode coming up tomorrow right here on Locked On Wild. We've got new episodes for you every Monday through Friday as part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We are your team each and every day.